In the last video, we finished up by talking about some of the abiotic, non-living components of an ecosystem, including things like sunlight and temperature and nutrient availability in the soil and space and annual precipitation, and all of these kinds of non-living features that an organism might have to interact with on the daily basis. However, there are other components of the environment as well, specifically the living components, and after all, since this is a biology course, we should probably focus on those quite a bit. Biologists study life across a very broad range of scales, from the molecules in a cell to the entire living planet. They divide this vast scope of biology into a series of structural levels. We've already talked about molecular biology and cell biology, and we've discussed how the cells come together to form tissues, and those tissues to organs, and those organs eventually form organisms. An organism is an individual living thing, like this rabbit that I've drawn here. When you have a group of organisms, all of the same species in the same place and time, we call that a population. For example, a warren of rabbits, or a tower of giraffes, a parliament of owls, or an ostentation of peacocks. Even animals that you would generally think about as living solitary lifestyles still live in populations, because otherwise they would never be able to reproduce. For example, snakes generally don't live communally, but you could still count up every snake in a 4-acre plot of land, and that would be your population of snakes. Of course, no population of organisms can live entirely by themselves. They require other members of the ecosystem in order to thrive. So these rabbits are going to require vegetation, both for food and for hiding from predators. The predators themselves are another biotic component of the ecosystem. The biotic components include anything that's alive and you interact with. So if a fox is regularly trying to hunt you, that is a pretty substantial biotic component of your ecosystem. There will also be some organisms that don't necessarily directly interact with our rabbit here, but are nevertheless a biotic component of the rabbit's environment. So a frog, for instance, is not going to be hunting a rabbit, and the rabbit's not going to be hunting it either. However, the rabbit and the frog will have certain resources that they compete for example, water or space. So in a way, they still are interacting with each other. When a scientist broadens their view of life in order to take into account all of the different populations that interact with each other in a given environment, what they are looking at is an ecological community. The more species that are present in an ecological community, the more biodiverse it is, and generally, more biodiversity is good. So then what exactly is an ecosystem? An ecosystem is the community of living organisms in a given area, the biotic components, plus all of the non-living components of the environment that we discussed last time, the temperature, the sunlight, how much rainfall there is, and even how much space is available to each organism. As we move forward with our discussion, we will consider ecology at the population, community, and ecosystem levels. To get us started, I'm going to begin with a conversation about food chains and food webs. These are community-level interactions that will allow us to track the flow of energy through an ecosystem.